I feel like one of the things about being the singer in the band is that obviously what I'm singing about is personal, but it also is like try to be sensitive to and represent like the whole group rather than just singing about stuff that's only my experience. The word psychedelic was a word that was created in the 1900s. Like someone made the word up by combining these two Greek words, psyche and delos. So psyche is like mind, or everyone knows what psyche is, but delos I guess means to manifest. So psychedelic means manifestation of the mind, essentially. So on the one hand there's like psychedelic drugs and substances which can be used to create that kind of a state, like where your mind is manifesting imagery or like different kind of perception. But that's only one. It's just psychedelic is just an adjective, and it refers on one hand to those kind of drugs, but also to like the experiences that you have on them. But it can also just refer to like a state of mind or a sort of way of perceiving things, and it doesn't require drugs to reach that state. So I feel like on the one hand it's kind of misinterpreted that like anytime the word psychedelic is used it's referring to drug use, because really it's what it's referring to is like an altered sense of perception, but that's, chemicals are only one way of achieving that, and definitely not the most sustainable way, And then musically speaking, or artistically speaking, like, to me, as someone that has a lot of experience with psychedelic states, both from chemicals and from other ways of achieving them, such as like meditation and breath work and dream work and yoga and fasting and automatic writing and rituals and all kinds of other ways of getting in that kind of headspace, and playing music itself can be very psychedelic. But like, I think that the word is used to describe music at this point in time, I feel like in a pretty shallow way. And so people think a lot of the time when it's like this new psychedelic band, it's sort of like referring to like the fact that they like use an echo pedal, or that they like wear like flowery shirts or something. It doesn't actually have to do with how it sounds. Where to me, like a lot of music that I think of as psychedelic, people probably never heard Pink Floyd or like necessarily did any drugs, but it's just the music is coming from a spiritual place, and so it alters your consciousness. Like my girlfriend Amanda takes photographs, and a lot of her photographs have a psychedelic quality, but it's not because there's like mirrored images and lots of effects on it. It's just because it captures a certain state of mind in a simple way. So it's like psychedelic can be much more subtle than like really affected guitar solos or like crazy colors, I guess surrealism and like Dadaism and like early art movements like that I'm really interested in, we're definitely tapping into psychedelia. And that was like Dadaists and surrealists were around the time that LSD was being invented. Which was interesting, but they weren't relying on those chemicals, but they came up with other methods of kind of like tripping out your brain, basically, like for instance like writing games where one person writes a word and then the other person doesn't see what it is, and they write a word, and then when you put them together, the combination, like sort of randomness, and it just alters your brain a little bit. Like those are some really cool versions of what psychedelic is to me that are kind of overlooked. Automatic writing, or like sort of like random word association, or things like collage. Like collage is a big part of it too. I make collage, but like putting this idea next to this idea creates a weird effect on your brain, and that's psychedelic. Definitely ties into like, it has more to do with like, it has to do with perception obviously, but it kind of has to do with like spirituality, for lack of a better word. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, partially that's inspired by this, like, old American gospel music, like Charlie Patton, who's a blues singer, but he also sang gospel songs. And he had a song called Prayer of Death. So, like, the song Prayer of Death that I wrote, but the title is inspired by Charlie Patton. But at the time that I made that was the first album where the whole band played on the record. It was, prior to that, it was my solo project, but then, and I had played with both Derek and Paz kind of separately, and on that record we all came together and started to sound like a band, but at the time that we were recording those songs, just sort of that theme was resonating with me a lot. This is kind of a crazy story, but like the song Prayer of Death itself, which is the title of the album too, I wrote that when my younger brother is like a rock climber and a hiker and like traveler, and he was missing basically at that time. He had gone on this hiking, like camping type of excursion, and no one in my family heard from him in like a couple weeks. And I started getting this like really strong feeling, like, what if I never see him again? Like, what if he's missing, or what if he's gone, you know? And so, yes, like,
So
that
the
song came
to
to me, and I recorded the song, and then after I recorded the song, he just like called and was like, "Hey, I'm having a great time on this trip." But so in this, he was fine. But in the song, I talk about like wanting to meet my brother in this, like, the world beyond and all this stuff. And you know, right before I started playing with Paz, her brother had actually passed away, and I never got to meet her brother. But through being close with her and knowing her in the aftermath of that, that's someone that, like, even though I've never met him, I feel like I know him, and I play his guitar. They belong to him, and so in a way, like, without even thinking about it, I was like writing the song as myself, but I was also taking on, or like connecting with her feelings and writing a song like kind of through, or like she wrote the song through me, or like her experience came through me. I don't really know how to explain it, but I've talked to her about that before. So now when I sing it, sometimes I say I want to meet your brother instead of my brother, because I realize that it's also about her brother. Like, so some of this, like, background of what that album is about too is like the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is basically like a manual for living people to help guide the souls of people who just died, like, out of the intermediary world that you go to right when you die into another incarnation. So it's like, apparently, like, in Tibet, they had over a long period of time, they mapped out like where you go before you get reincarnated, and so they, I guess, like, knew how to give you advice, like, to the souls that were hanging out between lives. So that's like partially what it's about. I'm not really sure, like, from my own experience, how I feel about reincarnation, but I feel like one thing that I definitely can tell is that, like, belief in reincarnation doesn't really have any bad effects. Like, whether it's true or not, like, usually people that believe in that are happier, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Because, the fear of death is a big part of life, but, like, your level of peace and happiness in life seems to relate to your amount of fear or worry or sort of about death. So,
right.
Like, if you don't really understand it, but you feel like probably you'll be back, then it's not as big of a deal. So whether it's true or not, it seems to help people like to think that, I've also definitely there's a lot of like stories that I've read that are pretty crazy about people remembering things from the past that they had no reason to know, and feeling like they must have been this other person in a past life and things like that. But even if that's just memories that we have in ourselves, or sort of memories that we pick up psychically, even though I wasn't necessarily this person before, but I could still tap into their experience, the collective unconscious. That's still just that feeling that there's something more than what we understand I think is helpful to have, rather than being because I can't prove that, I'm not going to believe in it. Just being open to the possibility of those things seems to be a healthier approach. Probably the motivation for creating songs or creating anything, in a specific way, it seems to change over time. Or at a different time in my life, I'll be inspired by a different thing. Or but then if you zoom out from that and just go back to what motivates all of it is, at least for me and for a lot of people that I know who are artists or musicians in a full-on way, they're not at some point they decided that was what they're here to do. There's there's a decision in that, but there's also I kind of can't help it, I can't really imagine doing anything else, or if I didn't do that, I don't know what else I would do, or some of this, I think now I have to work harder to finish songs or to create things, so I have to be more disciplined. But when I was younger, at least a lot of the time songs would just come out of me and I didn't even try to make them.